The night before my daughter's wedding, her fiancé looked me in the eye and said the best gift I could give was to disappear. So I did. But I took my $85,000 with me, and the entire wedding. His arrogance sparked it. What followed was cold, calculated, and unforgettable revenge. My name is Stuart Patterson. I'm 57, a widower, and I run a small but steady plumbing supply business in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest, and it kept me grounded after my wife, Caroline, passed away 3 years ago. Cancer took her fast and early. One minute we were planning our retirement, the next I was learning how to cook pasta without burning it. It broke me in ways I still don't understand. But there was one constant that pulled me through. My daughter, Sophia. She was the only child Caroline and I had, our miracle baby after years of trying. Sophia was the kind of kid who organized her school binders by color and cried when her goldfish died. She grew into a thoughtful, strong-willed woman who inherited her mother's laugh and her love for watercolor painting. She's 28 now, and the reason I kept getting out of bed after Caroline passed. The rehearsal dinner had just ended at the Marriott in Uptown Charlotte. The evening had gone off without a hitch. White tablecloths, soft jazz trio, speeches that leaned a little too long, and enough wine to float a canoe. Sophia had looked beautiful in a pale blue dress that made her eyes pop. She spent most of the evening bouncing between tables, making sure guests were happy, stopping to squeeze my hand every now and then. Kevin, her fiancé, was the picture of charm. Tall, well-dressed, marketing job at some tech firm I never quite understood. He said all the right things, laughed at the right jokes, and thanked me, publicly, for being the glue that held everything together. But it was all surface, a performance. I'd known it for months. He was polite in public and dismissive in private, the kind of man who never missed a photo op but always missed the point. Still, I tried, for Sophia's sake. When she brought him home 2 years ago, I wanted to like him. Caroline would have wanted that. I told myself I was being too protective, too emotional. But a man knows when he's being tolerated, not respected. And Kevin? He barely hit it. That night, after the dinner ended and the guests began trickling upstairs to their rooms, I lingered in the hotel lobby. I wasn't ready to call it a night. The light from the chandelier made the marble floor glow, and the scent of lilies from the centerpieces still hung in the air. I stood by the elevators, replaying the evening in my head, wondering if I'd imagined that flicker of annoyance on Kevin S.'s face every time someone thanked me for the wedding. That's when he approached me, alone. "Stuart," Kevin said, stepping into my path just as I reached for the elevator button. His voice was flat, devoid of anger, emotion, or even pretense. "We need to talk." I glanced around. The lobby had emptied out. The last of the guests had gone upstairs, and the hotel bar was winding down. It was just the two of us now. He didn't look nervous or conflicted, just focused, like a man about to close a deal he thought was beneath him. "What's on your mind?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He didn't waste time. "The best gift you could give Sophia and me," he said, "is to disappear from our lives." Just like that. No build-up, no apology, no fake smile. Just words as sharp and cold as broken glass. I blinked, thinking maybe I'd misheard him. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." He folded his arms like this was a business negotiation. "You've been hovering, interfering, trying to run everything. The wedding, the planning, the vibe. Sophia's too polite to say anything, but you're smothering us." I stared at him, 1,000 thoughts buzzing in my head. I thought about the 12-hour days I'd worked to fund their wedding, about the venue I'd booked, the deposits I'd paid, the upgrades I agreed to, wine Kevin picked, the band Kevin insisted on. I thought about Sophia's teary hug the day I offered to cover everything, and Kevin's handshake that followed, his mouth saying thank you while his eyes said something else. He kept talking. "You act like you own us just because you're paying for things. We don't need your charity." That hit harder than I expected. Charity? No, this wasn't charity. It was love. It was a grieving father trying to give his daughter the wedding her mother would have planned. It was memories and promises and silent prayers in the middle of the night that Sophia would be happy. But to Kevin, it was leverage, a transaction, a pawn to be played or discarded. "Okay," I said quietly. He blinked. "Okay." "You want me gone," I said, pulling out my phone. "Then I'm gone." "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice finally cracking just a little. "Granting your wish," I said. Calm, detached, efficient. I scrolled through my contacts and found the first name. Jennifer, our wedding coordinator. I hit dial. "Jennifer, it's Stuart Patterson. I need to cancel all services for tomorrow's wedding. Yes, all of them, effective immediately." Kevin's face drained of color. "Wait, what are you doing?" he said again, reaching for my arm. I shrugged him off. "You said we'd be better off without my interference, so let's find out." Next call, the caterer, then the florist, then the band. Each call was a nail in the coffin of a wedding that just minutes ago had been a carefully curated dream. Kevin stood there, frozen, as I unraveled everything he'd taken for granted. In 10 minutes, I wiped out 8 months of planning. "You don't get to do this," he finally snapped. I looked him in the eye. I already did. The elevator dinged behind me. I stepped in and turned to face him. "You didn't just lose me," I said. "You lost everything that came with me." The doors closed before he could answer. I rode up to my room in silence, my pulse finally catching up to the moment. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the weight of it settle in. He wanted me to disappear, so I did. And I took his illusion of control with me. The wedding coordinator was stunned. "You're canceling everything?" Jennifer asked, her voice rising just slightly over the line. "Mr. Patterson, the ceremony is tomorrow." "I'm aware," I said. "But I am the one who booked everything, and I am the one pulling the plug." She started to protest, but I cut her off. "This isn't a mistake. Please notify the vendors. I'll handle any penalties." As I ended the call, Kevin's hand hovered near his phone like he was about to call someone. Maybe Sophia, maybe one of his groomsmen. But he just stood there, mouth open, powerless. And that's when it hit him. He had no leverage, no money, no backup plan. He wasn't the architect of this wedding. He was a beneficiary, a passenger, and the driver had just yanked the wheel. "Stuart, wait. Let's talk about this," he said, suddenly softer, less sure. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was focused. Next up, the florist. "Yes, cancel the full order. Bouquets, aisle runners, centerpieces, no delivery tomorrow." The band. "Tell them not to bother tuning up. The reception's not happening." The caterer. "Cancel all food prep. I'll eat the deposit." The photographer. "There won't be anything to shoot." The honeymoon travel agent. "Cancel the flights, cancel the resort, cancel the champagne on arrival." Each call was precise, clinical. It was like disassembling a bomb, piece by expensive piece. Except this time I wasn't trying to prevent an explosion. I was setting one off. By the time I was done, Kevin had backed away like I'd just turned into something he couldn't comprehend. For the first time since the engagement, he looked rattled, small. Not the slick, confident charmer who could lie to a room and make it sound like sincerity. Now he was just a man in over his head. "You're overreacting," he said. "This is insane. Think about Sophia." I paused. "Oh, I am thinking about her," I said. "That's why I'm doing this." And with that, I turned and walked away. Back in my hotel room, I locked the door and dropped my phone on the nightstand. It was already buzzing with notifications. Texts, voicemails, missed calls. Kevin, probably. Sophia, maybe. Guests asking where the schedule was. Vendors confirming cancellations. I didn't touch it. I poured myself a glass of the overpriced wine the hotel had placed in the room and sat down by the window. Outside, the lights of Charlotte flickered like nothing had changed. But everything had. I leaned back in the chair and thought about all the moments that led to this. Kevin interrupting Sophia mid-sentence, correcting her about her own memories. His smug comments disguised as jokes. The way he'd made me feel like a burden in my own family. The truth was, I'd been swallowing my pride for months. I'd stayed quiet for Sophia, played along for appearances, justified every slight because maybe he's just stressed, or maybe I'm reading too much into it. But Kevin's words in that lobby weren't ambiguous. They weren't misinterpreted. They were crystal clear. The best gift you could give us is to disappear. So I disappeared. And when I did, I took his dream day with me. I looked at the untouched garment bag hanging near the closet, my suit for the ceremony. I had planned to walk Sophia down the aisle. That image had gotten me through long nights and quiet mornings. It had been my tether to Caroline, my imagined moment of peace. Now, I wouldn't be at the wedding at all. But maybe that was for the best, because the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't canceling Sophia's wedding. I was canceling Kevin's, and maybe, just maybe, I'd saved her from a lifetime of the same kind of quiet disrespect he'd shown me. My phone buzzed again. Another call, another voicemail. I turned it over, screen side down, and closed my eyes. Let the chaos begin. It didn't happen all at once. Kevin didn't waltz into our lives wearing a red flag. He came in with a polished smile, firm handshake, and a resume that made him sound like the American dream. Sophia introduced him over dinner one night 2 years ago, her eyes shining like a woman who believed she'd found her future. I wanted to like him. Hell, I tried. Caroline would have told me to give him a fair shot, so I did. He was charming enough on the surface. Always, yes, sir, and thank you, Mr. Patterson. He laughed at my jokes, asked questions about the business, even pretended to care about the local basketball team. It was all very polite. But there were moments, small ones, like the first time we went to dinner together. The waitress asked what Sophia wanted to drink, and Kevin answered for her without even glancing her way. She didn't say anything, just smiled and sipped the wine he'd picked. Later that night, I brought it up jokingly. He just smirked and said, "She likes it when I take the lead." I brushed it off. Then came the phone checking during family dinners. The quiet eye rolls when Sophia reminisced about her childhood or mentioned her mom. He'd nod and smile, but there was always this undercurrent of disinterest, like he was biding time until the conversation turned back to him. He monopolized conversations, subtly steering them toward his job, his ideas, his future. If anyone challenged him even lightly, he'd laugh it off like they were being ridiculous. Sophia, to her credit, tried to include me, but I could see the shift happening. She stopped talking about the wedding in front of him, stopped asking for advice when he was around. Still, I told myself I was being old-fashioned. Maybe this was just how modern couples worked. More independent, more equal, whatever that meant. I kept the peace. I bit my tongue. Then they got engaged. Kevin didn't ask for my blessing. That stung a little. Not because I needed it, but because Caroline would have wanted that for Sophia. Still, I congratulated them, hosted the family dinner, toasted their future. And when the planning started, I stepped up. I offered to pay for the wedding, not as a bribe, not for control, but because I wanted to give Sophia the kind of day her mother would have dreamed up. A cathedral ceremony, a full reception, flowers, music, laughter, everything. Sophia cried when I made the offer. Kevin just smiled and said, "Thanks, Stuart. That's incredibly generous." But there was something off about the way he said it, like I'd just agreed to fund a project he didn't believe I should have an opinion on. At first, he didn't push back much. He let Sophia and me handle the details, church bookings, caterers, photographers. But slowly, things changed. Whenever I voiced a preference about the menu, the seating chart, the music, Kevin would complain to Sophia afterward. He never said it to my face, but I'd hear about it secondhand. "He says you're making all the decisions," Sophia said once, trying to keep the peace. I laughed. "I thought we were helping you plan it together. He just wants to feel included." But he didn't want to plan. He wanted control. He started pushing for upgrades. Premium wines, live jazz trio instead of a DJ, first-class honeymoon flights. Every suggestion came with a smile and a, "We just want it to be special." But the cost was always mine to absorb. I'd foot the bill, and he'd act like it was his idea. Then came the bachelor party. I found out about it after the fact. $4,000 for a weekend in Miami with his friends. Flights, hotel suites, bottle service. When I asked why it hadn't come up earlier, he said, "I figured you were good for it. If not, I'll cover it, eventually." Eventually. That one word lit a fuse I didn't realize had been smoldering for months. Still, I didn't pull the trigger. Not until the night before the wedding, when I heard him on the phone in the hallway outside the ballroom, talking to someone I assumed was his best man. After tomorrow, I won't have to pretend to like the old man anymore. Sophia's too sentimental about her mom to see it, but he's just using the wedding to feel important. Whatever. If writing checks keeps him out of the way, fine. I stood frozen in the shadows. Pretend to like me keeps me out of the way? That was the moment the scales finally fell. All the signs I'd ignored came rushing back. Every quiet insult, every dismissive glance, every manipulation wrapped in charm. Kevin hadn't just disrespected me. He'd been lying to Sophia, using her love for her family as a tool to maintain his narrative. And then, the final blow. His calm suggestion the next night that I disappear from their lives. He meant it. He wasn't angry or caught up in emotion. He was calculating, clinical. He saw me as a problem to eliminate, so I did what he asked, and made sure he'd never forget what disappearing really looks like. The morning of the wedding should have been serene. Bridesmaids sipping mimosas, nervous laughter in the bridal suite, final touches on makeup and hair. Instead, it was chaos. Vendors were showing up to locked venues. Florists were calling to confirm what they'd already been told. Don't deliver. The caterer was furious, threatening legal action for last-minute cancellations. And Kevin? Kevin was finally understanding what life looked like without my money smoothing over every bump. I woke early in my mountain cabin, a 3-hour drive from Charlotte, and poured a fresh cup of coffee. The air was crisp, the sky a gentle orange. It was the first peaceful morning I'd had in months. No planning spreadsheets, no meetings, no fake smiles across a table from a man who treated me like I was disposable. I sat on the porch, phone turned face down beside me, and listened to the silence. It didn't last long. The first call came just after 6 a.m., a local number I didn't recognize. Then another. Then Sophia's name lit up my screen. I ignored them all. By 7:30, I had 15 missed calls and a half-dozen voicemails. I finally turned my phone on silent. I knew what was happening. The machine Kevin had relied on was shutting down, and he didn't know how to rebuild it. At 8:02 a.m., Jennifer, the wedding coordinator, called. Her message was breathless, panicked. Vendors were arriving, finding everything canceled. Some were demanding payment, others were leaving in frustration. "Kevin said he's trying to fix it," she said. "But nothing's working. He doesn't have the money." Of course he didn't. Kevin never had the money. He had charm, connections, confidence, but none of that paid for a $28,000 catering bill or a first-class honeymoon. He had expected me to keep funding the fantasy, even after telling me I wasn't welcome in it. From what I heard later, Kevin started making desperate calls to banks, friends, even his parents. But wiring tens of thousands of dollars with no notice on a Saturday morning? Not happening. His credit cards were maxed. His parents were driving in from Tennessee, still under the impression everything was fine. Sophia, meanwhile, was in shock. She left me a voicemail around 9 a.m. Her voice cracked as she spoke, still trying to hold everything together. "Dad, the florist just left. The church says you canceled the ceremony. Kevin says you're having some kind of breakdown. Please call me." That one hurt. Not because I thought she believed it, but because she didn't know what to believe. She was caught between the man she loved and the father who'd never let her down. But this wasn't about emotions anymore. This was about consequences. At 10:30 a.m., I finally turned my phone back on. It vibrated non-stop for nearly a full minute. Voicemails, texts, missed calls, notifications from every app imaginable. Kevin had gone from smug to panicked to furious. He'd told his friends and family I'd lost my mind, that I was bitter, jealous, trying to sabotage his wedding because I couldn't let go. But here is the thing about a lie. It collapses when you remove the scaffolding propping it up, and I had just yanked every beam out from under him. Sophia finally called again at 11 a.m. Her voice was steadier this time, but tight, like she was holding back tears. "Dad," she said, "Kevin says we can still save it. If we get the money together, he's trying to get a loan." "With what collateral?" I asked gently. "Hope?" Silence on the other end. I don't understand. How did it come to this?" I sighed, looked out at the mountains. "Sweetheart, I didn't cancel your wedding to punish you. I canceled Kevin's wedding to protect you." "What's the difference?" "The difference," I said, "is that a wedding is supposed to be two families joining. Kevin made it clear my family wasn't welcome. So I took my family and my money and left." By noon, there were guests arriving at the church to find locked doors, bridesmaids crying in hotel rooms, vendors asking who was paying, Kevin scrambling like a magician whose final trick had failed. And me? I poured another cup of coffee. I was done saving people from their own messes. At 12:30 p.m., just 90 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to start, Sophia called again. Her voice was quiet, flat. The kind of tone you hear from someone standing at the edge of a cliff, wondering how they got there. "Dad," she said, "I need you to tell me the truth about something. Always. Did you cancel the wedding because you wanted control over our marriage?" I let the question hang for a moment, then answered carefully. "No, sweetheart. I canceled the wedding because Kevin told me the best gift I could give your family was to disappear." A long silence. Then, "He says he never said that." "Of course he did." I took a breath. "Sophia, I recorded our conversation." That wasn't true. I hadn't recorded anything, but I needed her to think I had, because Kevin's reaction would tell her more than any file ever could. "You recorded him?" she asked, shocked. "I've learned to protect myself around people who rewrite history," I said gently. "Can I hear it?" Another pause. "Meet me at Murphy's Diner, Independence Boulevard, 30 minutes. Alone." She hesitated. "But the wedding's in 2 hours." "There is no wedding, Sophia. Not unless Kevin suddenly wins the lottery in the next hour. And even then, you and I need to talk." I arrived at Murphy's first and slid into a corner booth away from the windows. The waitress brought coffee. I didn't touch it. I stared at the empty seat across from me, wondering if this would be the moment that broke us for good, or healed something deeper than either of us had admitted. 20 minutes later, Sophia walked in wearing her robe and slippers, hair still in curlers, eyes rimmed red from crying. She looked exhausted, beautiful, but wrecked. She slid into the booth silently. I didn't ask how she was. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. "I didn't record our conversation," I said, "but I've been recording everything else." I handed the phone to her and let her scroll. Payment logs, vendor contracts, screenshots of receipts, timestamps of meetings Kevin never attended, notes on comments he made about me, quotes from the bachelor party. The time he told his groomsmen he'd never have to pretend to like the old man after the wedding. "This is what $85,000 of gratitude looks like," I said. She kept scrolling, her lips tightening. "Why didn't you show me this before?" "Because I thought you'd see it yourself. I hoped I was wrong." She set the phone down slowly, carefully, like it was made of glass. "He told me you offered to pay for the bachelor party. I offered to contribute to a reasonable celebration. He booked a luxury weekend and handed me the bill." She stared out the window. "I didn't know. I didn't want you to. Not back then. I didn't want to be the reason you doubted him. But now, I need you to see what he really is." She was silent for a long time. Then her voice cracked. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to postpone the wedding," I said softly. "Not forever, not unless you want to. But until you're sure you're marrying someone who respects your family, who respects you. All those people, they flew here. They're waiting at the church right now. They'll understand. If not today, then eventually, when they find out why." "What if Kevin apologizes?" I looked her in the eye. "Sophia, he's been lying to you for the last 12 hours. He lied about what he said to me. He lied about the money. He's lying to everyone trying to save face. Does that sound like someone who's sorry? Or someone who's cornered? Her shoulders slumped. Then the tears came. Not gentle bridal tears. These were hard, broken sobs, the kind that come when reality crashes down faster than your heart can brace for it. She covered her mouth, trying to muffle the sound. I didn't speak. I just slid a napkin across the table and let her feel it all. By the time she stopped crying, her voice was hoarse. What happens now? I reached across the table, squeezed her hand. Now, you decide what kind of life you want, and what kind of man you want to build it with. At 2 p.m., St. Peter's Cathedral should have been filled with music, flowers, and family. Instead, it was filled with confusion, frustration, and one man learning just how far $0 can stretch. And Sophia? She was with me, not in a gown, not at an altar, but at a diner booth, eyes clear for the first time in months, holding her father's hand, and finally, seeing the truth. By 2 p.m., St. Peter's Cathedral looked like a crime scene where the victim was dignity. Guests in formal wear milled around the front steps, clutching phones, squinting at texts, whispering anxiously. The giant floral arch that should have framed the altar, gone. The chairs, missing, the doors to the sanctuary, locked. A few bridesmaids stood in the courtyard, tear-streaked and confused, their perfect makeup ruined by stress and unanswered questions. And there, in the middle of it all, like a groom in a Shakespearean tragedy, stood Kevin, still in his tuxedo, tie tight, hair perfect, but nothing else was. He was on the phone, one hand pressed to his temple like he could physically hold his world together if he just pushed hard enough. His parents flanked him, clearly panicking. His mother kept looking around as if someone might show up and explain that this was all just a scheduling error. But it wasn't. There was no ceremony. There were no vendors. There was no wedding. I pulled my truck across the street and parked in the shade, sipping coffee from a to-go cup. I didn't plan to go in. I didn't plan to confront him. But then Kevin saw me. His head snapped toward my truck like a dog spotting a squirrel. In a flash, he was jogging across the street, tuxedo shoes slipping slightly on the hot asphalt, jacket flapping open, panic pouring off him in waves. He pounded on my window. "You son of a bitch!" I rolled it down halfway, calm as a Sunday morning. "You destroyed my wedding," he shouted. I raised an eyebrow. "Your wedding?" "Yes, my wedding." He looked around like he couldn't believe I needed that clarified. "I thought you could afford your own wedding, Kevin," I said coolly. "Isn't that what you told your groomsmen?" His face paled, mouth slightly agape. "What?" "Brandon called me this morning, wanted to know what really happened. Said you told everyone that once you married Sophia, you'd never have to pretend to like me again." Kevin blinked hard, processing. "You also said she felt guilty about her mom's death, and that's why she let me play wedding planner, to keep me busy." "I didn't—" "You said it," I cut in. "You just didn't think anyone would repeat it." But they did. By now, the spectacle had an audience. Guests were watching from the sidewalk. Bridesmaids were peeking through church windows. His parents looked like they wanted to melt into the pavement. Kevin glanced around, saw the eyes, and lowered his voice. "Please, Stuart, fix this." "There's nothing to fix," I said. "Sophia already called off the engagement." It was like I'd hit him in the chest. He stepped back. "What?" "She called it off an hour ago. She's not coming." No, she wouldn't do that." "She did." He staggered back a step, like the world had tilted beneath him. I leaned slightly toward the window. "You told me to disappear from your family. So I did. And when I did, the truth showed up in my place." His fists clenched at his sides. "You're going to regret this." "No, Kevin, you will. Not just because you lost a wedding, but because you showed everyone, including Sophia, exactly who you are." I started the engine. He reached for the door handle again, desperation clawing through his facade. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." And I drove away. In my rearview mirror, I watched Kevin shrink in the distance, just a man in a rented tux, surrounded by confusion, standing in the ruins of a life he thought he could manipulate into existence. Let him explain that to 200 guests. Let him tell his parents why they drove 6 hours for a ghost wedding. Let him finally, truly, stand on his own. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the villain in Kevin's story. I felt like the truth. The night before my daughter's wedding, her fiancé looked me in the eye and said the best gift I could give was to disappear. So I did. But I took my $85,000 with me, and the entire wedding. His arrogance sparked it. What followed was cold, calculated, and unforgettable revenge. My name is Stuart Patterson. I'm 57, a widower, and I run a small but steady plumbing supply business in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest, and it kept me grounded after my wife, Caroline, passed away 3 years ago. Cancer took her fast and early. One minute we were planning our retirement, the next I was learning how to cook pasta without burning it. It broke me in ways I still don't understand. But there was one constant that pulled me through. My daughter, Sophia. She was the only child Caroline and I had, our miracle baby after years of trying. Sophia was the kind of kid who organized her school binders by color and cried when her goldfish died. She grew into a thoughtful, strong-willed woman who inherited her mother's laugh and her love for watercolor painting. She's 28 now, and the reason I kept getting out of bed after Caroline passed. The rehearsal dinner had just ended at the Marriott in Uptown Charlotte. The evening had gone off without a hitch. White tablecloths, soft jazz trio, speeches that leaned a little too long, and enough wine to float a canoe. Sophia had looked beautiful in a pale blue dress that made her eyes pop. She spent most of the evening bouncing between tables, making sure guests were happy, stopping to squeeze my hand every now and then. Kevin, her fiancé, was the picture of charm. Tall, well-dressed, marketing job at some tech firm I never quite understood. He said all the right things, laughed at the right jokes, and thanked me, publicly, for being the glue that held everything together. But it was all surface, a performance. I'd known it for months. He was polite in public and dismissive in private, the kind of man who never missed a photo op but always missed the point. Still, I tried, for Sophia's sake. When she brought him home 2 years ago, I wanted to like him. Caroline would have wanted that. I told myself I was being too protective, too emotional. But a man knows when he's being tolerated, not respected. And Kevin? He barely hit it. That night, after the dinner ended and the guests began trickling upstairs to their rooms, I lingered in the hotel lobby. I wasn't ready to call it a night. The light from the chandelier made the marble floor glow, and the scent of lilies from the centerpieces still hung in the air. I stood by the elevators, replaying the evening in my head, wondering if I'd imagined that flicker of annoyance on Kevin S.'s face every time someone thanked me for the wedding. That's when he approached me, alone,